A maximum security prison transport drifts through deep space, carrying the worst criminals the system couldn't kill and didn't dare rehabilitate. One of them isn't like the others. He's not a killer, he's not a man, and the thing inside him is starting to wake up. This is the Warden. Welcome back, traveller. Before we set course tonight, take a second to anchor us. A thumbs up or a comment is like a signal ping through the void. It lets me know someone's out there. And if you feel like journeying with us again, subscribing opens the hatch to all future missions. Dim the lights, get comfortable. Tonight, we drift into the unknown. Chapter 1. Among the Dead. There were only 2 rules aboard the Barrowgate. Don't touch the walls, and don't speak unless spoken to. Neither rule was posted anywhere. The ship taught them to you, through bruises, shocks, or the sound of someone choking on their own blood. Nyla Trent had been on the transport for 4 days, and she already knew who was going to die next. He sat across from her in the cafeteria, slurping nutrient broth from a dented tray with both hands shaking. He had a wire burn on one wrist and the glassy-eyed stare of a man who'd already stopped living. His barcode tag read T0146, no name. They never used names here. She didn't speak to him, didn't warn him. She'd seen this before. The Barrowgate moved like a dying animal through deep space, its interior dim and flickering, as if the ship's systems had given up pretending they weren't rotting from the inside out. Steel corridors wept condensation. Every third light buzzed, crackling like it had something to say but forgot how to form words. Nyla's cell was located in Cell Block D, Unit 7. A triple-tiered segment reserved for non-violent offenders, which was a polite way of saying, those they don't need to keep awake at night. The real monsters were down in Block F. She'd seen one of them through the bars on day 2. A silhouette in a restraint rig, face obscured, strapped upright and unmoving. Guarded by 2 drones and 3 armed humans. No name, no cellmate, no daylight. His tag just read, Subject 83. She remembered the file. A black flag prisoner. Transfer authorization from 3 departments. No accompanying conviction record. No court listing. Just coordinates. And a note scrawled in red ink at the bottom of the document. Maintain sedation. Do not engage. That was why she was here. Nyla Trent wasn't a prisoner. Not really. She was an agent of internal oversight. Buried deep under the ID of a disgraced dock thief with a 10-year sentence and a fake neural burn scar. Her mission was simple. Find out why so many people on this transport were dying, and what the hell was wrong with Subject 83. She lay in her bunk that night with the lights dimmed to red. The hum of the ship's reactor droned through the walls like a lullaby written by a murderer. She kept one eye on the ceiling, one hand beneath her pillow where the bone knife was hidden, carved from a stolen serving tray edge. Not standard issue, but clean enough to slit a throat in silence. At 3:14 ship time, the lights flickered. Then everything stopped. No sound, no vibration, no gravity. Nyla floated upward 1/2 an inch, body tense. The backup systems should have kicked in immediately. They didn't. Then came the screaming. 1 deck below, short, sharp, gurgled at the end, then silence. The lights came back a second later. Gravity snapped on with a thud, throwing her back into her bunk. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. Nyla sat up, heart hammering. The guards didn't respond. That was the part that stuck with her. No boots, no weapons, no lockdown. Like it hadn't happened at all. At breakfast the next day, T0146 wasn't there. His tray sat untouched at the end of the line, steam still rising from the bowl. Nyla sat in her usual spot and waited. That was when she saw it. Scratched into the underside of her tray, faint but unmistakable. Don't let it out. She didn't move, didn't react, just kept eating. She knew then someone else was awake on this ship, and they were trying to warn her. Chapter 2. Locked doors and open eyes. The Barrowgate ran cold. That was by design. Cold made the inmates slow, made them think twice before lashing out or moving too fast in the dark. It seeped into bone and memory until even the thought of rebellion felt like too much effort. Nyla wrapped her arms around herself as she stepped into the maintenance corridor just past sanitation. It wasn't on any posted map. That's how she knew she was getting close. She'd swiped a key wafer from one of the guards 2 days ago, just enough access to get past the lower bulkhead without raising flags. The ship's AI wasn't watching her. Not yet. The corridor curved downward at an odd angle, leading into the mid-spine of the vessel. It smelled different here. Old copper, recycled breath, ozone and ammonia. There were no cameras, no crew, just one reinforced door at the far end, lined with soft blue light and humming quietly. Subject 83, secure containment. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, she studied the panel. Sedation dosage readouts, heart rate monitor, neural activity spikes. One of them blinked red. She checked it again. No mistake. There had been a spike in cortical function during last night's blackout, just before the screaming. Someone else knew it too. She could see a manual override had been triggered. Someone had tried to increase the sedation, but it hadn't worked. Whatever 83 was, whoever, he was waking up. A low clank echoed behind her. Nyla turned fast. No one there, just the ship groaning like something alive and wounded. She backed away from the door slowly, fingers tracing the edge of the key wafer in her pocket. She wasn't ready yet. Back in cell block D, things had changed. The inmates were quieter, less movement in the halls. The guards stopped doing rounds. One of them, she'd heard the others call him Grish, hadn't been seen in 36 hours. No announcement, no explanation, the kind of disappearance you didn't ask about. That evening, she watched the guards escort a new prisoner into Block F. He was shackled at the wrists, head down, face obscured under a pressure hood. The escort team moved with twitchy urgency, too many weapons drawn, too much tension in their shoulders. They were afraid. Nyla sat on her bunk and waited for the lights-out pulse. Then she moved. She took the access ladder down 2 levels, quiet as breath, and found the restricted maintenance panel outside the isolation wing. A single motion sensor covered the corridor. She threw a thermal blanket over it, just long enough to slip past. The door to 83's unit was closed, but not sealed. That was the second red flag. Inside was dim, red lighting. A faint hiss of ventilation and something colder, deeper, hiding under the air. The room was more chamber than cell, circular, reinforced with radiation shielding, lined with layered mesh and burst lock bolts. He sat in the middle, still strapped upright to the restraint frame. Unmoving. At first glance, he looked normal, human, male, maybe late 30s, pale skin, buzzed hair, lean but not frail. Wires ran from his arms and neck into the restraint rig, blinking in slow pulses like heartbeat monitors in reverse. Then his eyes opened. She froze. They weren't blank. They weren't drugged. They were watching. She took a step forward, slow. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "My name is Nyla. I work for—" "I know who you are," he said. His voice wasn't what she expected. It was calm, clear, no tremor, no sedative fog. She blinked. "Your file says you haven't spoken in 6 years." They stopped listening. She looked around, uneasy. "You're not sedated." "Not anymore." "Why?" They tried. It didn't take. She took another step closer. "What are you?" His eyes met hers without blinking. There was no malice there, no fear, just understanding. "Not the threat you're looking for." Nyla's heart thudded once, hard. "You were awake during the blackout." "I never sleep." "You heard the screaming." "Yes." "Did you cause it?" "No." "Then what did?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said something that made her blood run cold. "You're asking the wrong question." She stared at him. "What question should I be asking?" He tilted his head slightly, like listening to something she couldn't hear. "Then, why did they put it on this ship in the first place?" She stepped back. "Put what?" He looked up, straight through the ceiling, past the walls, into the stars. "It's not in me," he said. "Not anymore." The restraint rig let out a soft hiss. One of the straps twitched, like pressure was changing. She turned to leave. But before she did, he said one more thing. "They brought me here to contain it, but they waited too long." Nyla didn't run, not yet. But her hands were shaking as she keyed the door closed behind her, and she didn't sleep that night, not even a little. Chapter 3. Black Signals. The bridge of the Barrowgate was a tomb with control panels. Too quiet, no music, no chatter, just the low hum of systems running on rote programming and fear. Crewmen whispered orders to each other like they were afraid the ship would overhear them and punish disobedience with a decompression alert. Nyla stood at the back of the command deck, arms crossed, eyes scanning the display readouts. Her stolen credentials had gotten her limited access, janitorial oversight, vent schematics, drone traffic logs, but even on restricted clearance, she could see the numbers didn't add up. Fuel was fine, reactor stable, external traffic, 0, but the ship was bleeding power in random pulses every few hours. Not a systems failure, not leakage. Something was drawing current inside the ship, and whatever it was, the logs were being rewritten 2 minutes after each pulse. Covered up. Nyla stepped into a side alcove where an old maintenance terminal hummed to itself. She jacked in with her hand held and started pulling back deleted fragments, subroutines that never finished executing, time-stamped pings to decommissioned drone clusters, half-buried AI decision trees with redacted triggers. It took her 11 minutes to find it. A signal, small, repeating, buried in the system pingbacks. Not a message, at least not in any standard sense. Just a low-frequency carrier wave modulated in 2-second bursts. It hadn't come from the ship, it had come to it. She ran the origin scan again. The signal was being received from a deep space beacon registered to a mining outpost that had gone dark 6 years ago, the same outpost where Subject 83 had been found. She felt the hairs on her neck rise. The mess hall was quieter than usual. No fights, no yelling, just inmates eating without talking. Even the lifers were silent. Something had shifted. Nyla sat across from a man known only as Cray. He was 6'4", half tattoos, half scar tissue, and had been in the system since before Mars declared its independence. He'd been a gang enforcer, a pit fighter, and according to 3 separate rumors, a cannibal. But he was also old school. He remembered when people disappeared for a reason, and he had eyes in places she didn't. "You been feeling it?" she asked. He looked up slowly, spoon halfway to his mouth. "The pressure?" he said. "Yeah." He set the spoon down. "It's wrong, not gravity, not airflow, something pulling. Like the ship's being leaned on from the outside." Nyla nodded. "You see anything down on F tier lately?" Cray's eyes narrowed. "You're not supposed to ask that." "Neither are you." He wiped his mouth with a sleeve and leaned in. "One of the guards, Castillo. He started locking himself inside his own bunk, rigged a proximity mine outside the hatch. Said the shadows were changing, said something was knocking on the walls." "What happened to him?" Cray shrugged. "He ain't in his bunk anymore." That night, the lights flickered again. 3 prisoners in Block C woke up screaming. 2 more never woke up at all. No cause of death, just empty beds and red smears on the ceiling like someone had tried to peel the steel off with their fingernails. Nyla didn't sleep. She sat in her cell with the lights off, watching her own breath fog in the air. At 3:18 a.m., her cell terminal pinged. Just once. A system diagnostic flash. Harmless. Routine. Except it wasn't her turn. And the message embedded inside was in old encryption. Oversight code. Someone else from the Bureau was on the ship, but they weren't contacting her. They were watching her. She found Subject 83 again the next morning, still strapped to the rig, still breathing steady, but something was different. He wasn't looking at her this time. He was looking at the door. "Something's coming," he said, before she even spoke. Nyla stepped inside, closing the hatch behind her. "Coming from where?" He didn't answer. She crossed the room, slower now, more cautious. Something about him was more aware, like he could hear things through the metal, feel things moving through vibration alone. "What's the signal?" she asked. That made him look at her. A long stare, something cold, not hostile, just old. "You found it," he said. She nodded. "It's a call and response pattern, one that doesn't match any known language. It's not human." "No," he said. "You're not surprised." "No," he said again. "Who sent it?" He looked past her, then, softly. "Something that used to be outside. Now it's in." "In what?" He finally met her eyes again. "This ship." Nyla took a step back. He wasn't talking about the signal, he was talking about the thing riding on it. "Then why are you still here?" she asked. "You already know." He glanced down at his own restraints, at the wires, pulsing just beneath his skin. "I'm the failsafe," he said. That's when the lights failed again. But this time, the backup didn't come on. And this time, she heard the screaming right outside the door. Chapter 4. Breakpoint. The screaming outside wasn't panic. It was something worse. It was pleading, short, broken sentences, words that didn't fit together. Then silence. Then the wet sound of something coming apart. Nyla didn't hesitate. She pulled the emergency latch and sealed the chamber from the inside. Thick metal hissed into place, bolts sliding home like the final turn of a coffin lid. Subject 83 didn't move. "What's out there?" she asked. He didn't answer. She crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed the edge of his restraint frame. "You said it got in. What is it?" He tilted his head, eyes glassy. "It doesn't have a shape. It uses ours." She stared at him. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." He shifted in the rig, barely, but enough to trigger a diagnostic chime from the restraint interface. One of the neural inhibitors flickered amber, then red, a warning. "I was designed to hold it," he said. "That was my function." "You're not a prison," Nyla snapped. "You're a man." He didn't argue, but he didn't confirm either. A sharp bang echoed through the corridor outside. Not gunfire, not footsteps. It was the sound of a body hitting steel at speed. Nyla's mind flashed to Cray, to the 3 silent prisoners in Block C, to the guard who'd mined his own bunk. They'd known something was wrong. They just hadn't lived long enough to explain it. She turned to the terminal on the wall and keyed into the internal camera feed. Most were dark, a few showed static, but one, Block F Hallway 3. She froze. The feed showed a figure moving down the corridor, but it wasn't right. The body shape changed as it walked. Too tall, then too short, then something hunched. The movement was jerky, like it was learning how to use limbs. And the face. The feed glitched every time it came into focus. But for a split second, it looked exactly like Nyla. She backed away from the terminal. "You've seen it," 83 said. She nodded slowly. "It's mimicking," she whispered. "Learning." "It's not done," he said. Nyla moved fast after that. She bypassed the lock on the internal restraint control and started unhooking wires. The rig fought her, safety overrides chirping, lights flashing red, but she overrode the commands with her own access codes. Bureau level. Subject 83 didn't flinch as the restraints unlocked. He slumped forward for a moment, catching himself on the edge of the rig. Then he stood, straight, balanced, too smooth. "You sure this is a good idea?" she asked. "No," he said, "but it's the only one we have." They moved out of the cell together. The corridor was dim, but not yet dark. Emergency lights flickered at every third junction, casting red halos across the walls. There was blood on the floor. Not a lot, just enough to lead somewhere. Nyla had her bone knife out. Useless, probably, but it gave her something to hold. They passed 2 bodies in the hall, 1 prisoner, 1 guard, both with shattered skulls and eyes torn clean from their sockets. No signs of a fight, just absence. Subject 83 didn't look down. He didn't blink. They reached the central stairwell just as the ship shuddered, a low, deep moan from the structure itself, like something massive had shifted along the hull. Nyla turned to the console near the stair rail, tapped into environmental controls. What she saw made her stomach turn. The AI was offline, comms were dark, but there was movement. Every deck had heat signatures, but they weren't clustered in cells or guard quarters. They were spreading, like mold. "What's the nearest control access?" 83 asked. Nyla pointed down. "Engineering, 4 levels, but if the system's fully compromised, then we isolate it physically, cut the core, purge what we can. Assuming it hasn't already rooted in the failsafes." He looked at her. "That's your job." She didn't ask how he knew that, just started moving. The descent was slow. They moved through maintenance shafts and emergency ladders, avoiding open corridors. Every time the lights flickered, Nyla held her breath. Twice they heard it moving, not footsteps, just the sound of pressure changing, like gravity bending in the wrong direction. Once they passed a mirror in a hallway junction. It didn't reflect them. It showed them standing still, even when they moved. She didn't look at mirrors again. Engineering was sealed. Manual override required dual input. Nyla knelt to access the console while 83 watched the corridor behind them. As she keyed in the first sequence, he spoke. "It's learning your face." She didn't stop typing. "I figured. If it mimics your signal and overrides the terminal, I'll fry the interface before it gets a chance." He paused. "You've done this before." She didn't answer. Then, Lysium Station. 2 years ago, AI breach. 17 dead. "That was you," she nodded. "I burned the whole station to kill it." "Did it work?" "I don't know." The door hissed open. Inside, the engineering core glowed faint blue, power readings steady, but not normal. The reactor was overclocking in microbursts, uncommanded. Something inside the system was trying to open a signal channel. Nyla stepped forward, console in hand. "Buy me time," she said. Behind her, Subject 83 stepped into the shadows and waited. The door slid shut behind them, and the lights began to die. Chapter 5. The Thing That Listens. The engineering deck was too quiet. Not the silence of absence, but the hush of breath held too long. The kind of silence that feels shaped, directed, like it's listening for you to move. Nyla stood at the primary reactor console, hands moving fast across the outdated interface. Code scrolled across the cracked screen in pale green text, interrupted every few seconds by flashes of static. Someone, or something, was trying to mask its presence. She bypassed the diagnostics and dropped into subroute. The access shell was buried under 6 layers of protocol, but someone had already been here. Doors already forced open, logs tampered with, processes renamed with gibberish placeholders. Her console blinked once, then spat out a question. "Do you see me now?" She froze, then forced the line closed and dropped the firewall hard. The core lights flickered in sync with her pulse. Not coincidence. Behind her, Subject 83 remained still, standing near the coolant line bulkhead, eyes locked on the hallway entrance. "It's bleeding into the code," Nyla said. "No signature, just structure. It doesn't think in words." "Because it doesn't need to," 83 replied. "Then how do we fight it?" "You don't." She turned toward him. "That's not helpful." He didn't flinch. "It's not a weapon you can aim, it's an idea. One that infects the rules of systems. Human, digital, structural. It enters as noise, leaves as command." Nyla stared. "You're saying this thing is viral?" "I'm saying it reorders understanding. The crew didn't get sick. They got rewritten." Nyla turned back to the console. "Then we unwrite it." She opened the coolant flood valves, set the fusion core to manual, bypassed 3 safety interlocks. She was going to purge it, hard reset the ship. Anything still connected, organic or not, would be caught in the fire. She was 5 seconds from initializing the cycle when a voice came through the intercom. Not a voice. Her voice. "Nyla," it said softly. "You don't have to do this." She froze. The console flickered. The screen displayed her own face, pixelated and blurry. The mouth moved out of sync with the words. "We're not your enemy." The sound was gentle, measured, but it came with a low vibration, subaudible, just at the edge of perception. It made her teeth ache. Subject 83 stepped forward, slow. "Don't listen," he said. Nyla's hand hovered over the execute command. Then the voice changed. "You left them behind on Vales." Nyla's blood turned to ice. "You said it was the only way," the voice continued. "But you never checked, never confirmed. What if some of them were still alive?" 83's hand landed hard on her shoulder. "It's not real." But her fingers trembled. The light dimmed again. All across the engineering bay, consoles came to life. Displays bloomed with shifting lines, circular diagrams, broken alphabets, flickering schematics of things that didn't exist. Her own voice whispered again. "We forgive you." Nyla gritted her teeth and slammed her hand down on the console. Nothing happened. The interface had changed. Commands had restructured. The purge option was gone. "I was too late," she said. "No," 83 said, stepping toward the center console. "You were never going to be fast enough. That's why I'm here." He pulled something from the back of his neck. A slender, dark filament of wet metal. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Nyla asked. "My anchor. The final gate. As long as it stays in me, the signal can't fully expand. And if it comes out, it blooms." The walls began to shake. The reactor core fluctuated, its blue light fading into a dull, pulsing red. The doors behind them burst open, but nothing stepped through. Just a shadow, a shape that wasn't. Nyla couldn't describe it, couldn't look at it. Her eyes kept sliding off it like it didn't belong in 3 dimensions. And then she saw her own face again, standing in the doorway, smiling. "Let it out," the thing said. Subject 83 turned to Nyla. "There's one last option." She shook her head. "You said we couldn't kill it." "We can't." "Then what?" "I hold it. You eject the bay." Her mouth went dry. "That'll kill you." "Yes." He handed her the filament. "Plug this into the override. It'll give you 30 seconds, long enough to vent me and the core together." Nyla looked at the doorway. The thing that looked like her was stepping closer. "Will it be enough?" she asked. 83 nodded once. "It will keep it from spreading. And if it isn't?" He looked up just once. "I'm sorry." Then he stepped into the fire, into the core chamber. The doors sealed behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Nyla jammed the filament into the override port. 30 seconds. The console blinked red. Override engaged. She turned away, didn't watch. The chamber door window flooded with light. The pressure alarm screamed. The fire came next, and the barrow gate shuddered like a living thing as its heart tore itself open. Chapter 6. The Listening Room. The fire hadn't killed it. Nyla knew that now. The damage to the ship was catastrophic, yes. Power relays melted, core guidance gone, atmosphere thin in places. But the infection hadn't been burned out with the purge. It had simply gone quiet, waiting. The air tasted stale, not like oxygen cycling through low-grade scrubbers, but like something that had been opened, something that didn't want to be breathed. Subject 83 moved slower now. Not injured, not tired, just heavy. Like gravity had found him specifically. They were searching for the source, not the infection itself, but the origin point. Somewhere on the ship, there had to be a node, a receiver, maybe physical, maybe not. The signal wasn't broadcasting anymore, but something still hummed underneath the walls, a pressure in the metal, a low rhythm, just below conscious thought, like the hum of a voice long silenced trying to remember how to scream. They passed through the dorsal spine of the barrow gate, past quarantine storage and redundant biosystem nodes. Half of the ship's diagnostics were gone, non-responsive or corrupted. Doors refused to open or opened too easily. Then they found the room. No number, no lock, just a rounded hatch covered in black grime and something older than rust. Not blood, not metal decay, something fungal, organic. The walls inside pulsed. Nyla stepped through first, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the dark. The beam lit up a wide chamber, maybe once a cargo bay or drone storage, now stripped of utility. Every surface had been scraped, etched, marked with symbols she didn't recognize. Some were burned in, others looked grown. In the center of the room stood a chair, not bolted down, not a restraint rig, just a plain steel chair facing the far wall. There were earphones resting on it, wired to nothing. Nyla's flashlight flickered once, then again. Subject 83 stepped in behind her. He stopped at the doorway. "This is where it started," he said. "How do you know?" He didn't answer. Nyla walked forward, slowly, eyes locked on the wall. Something was there. Not text, not code. Music. The wall vibrated gently, like low sound had been folded into the steel itself. She placed a hand on it, cold, then warm, then wrong. She yanked her hand away. The skin where her palm touched the wall was red, not burned, irritated, like it had been listening back. She turned to 83. He wasn't moving. His jaw was clenched tight, breath shallow. "You hear it?" she asked. "I always hear it." He stepped forward and sat in the chair. "No," Nyla said. "Don't." But he put the earphones on anyway. She rushed to stop him, but the moment the headphones touched his temples, his body jerked once, then stilled. Nyla froze. The lights in the room began to dim, not fade, but compress. The shadows became too sharp, the silence too dense. She stepped forward, reaching for him, and then his voice spoke, but it didn't come from his mouth. It came from the walls. "I remember. Now." She backed away. "We were not made to hold this." The symbols on the walls began to shift, just slightly, enough to feel like they were watching. "We are not prisons. We are promises." Then Subject 83 slumped forward. The headphones clattered to the floor. Nyla caught him before he hit the ground. His eyes fluttered. He looked up at her like a man waking from a long sleep. "I saw it," he whispered. "What it wants." "What?" "To speak." She shook her head. "Number we don't let it." His hand grabbed hers, tight. His eyes, wet, human. "I'm not sure we have a choice anymore." Then the wall behind them sighed, as if exhaling. And in the dust floating through the flashlight beam, Nyla saw something that chilled her to her core. A second chair, identical, facing hers, and it hadn't been there when they walked in. Chapter 7. Ghost Memory. The airlock to medbay wasn't sealed, that was the first warning. No hiss of pressure equalizing, no biometric scan, just a half-ajar door swaying gently as if something had only just passed through. Inside, the lights flickered, casting cold illumination across cracked floor tiles and medical gurneys stained with time and use. Not blood, just the residue of people who'd stopped being people long before they died. Nyla stood over a terminal in the corner of the room, accessing what little of the ship's medical log remained. She needed data. On the infection, on Subject 83, on herself. The screen blinked. Access granted file. Observation 5-512-Trent, N. She froze. It was her own psych file. Not from Barrowgate, from Varley's station. The screen showed her image, 2 years younger, eyes clearer, smile forced. A voice came on, a recording. "Agent Trent, please confirm for the record. You approved the reactor breach as a controlled countermeasure against the neural incursion event." Her voice followed. "I confirmed the breach. There were no other options." Another voice interrupted. A man's. Cold. "You didn't confirm the status of the evac teams before issuing the purge." Silence. Then her own voice, quieter. "I followed protocol." The screen cut to black. New footage began. Station security camera, low frame rate, hallways collapsing under fire, lights exploding. People running, clutching their heads, their mouths, shouting things that didn't match their faces. And Nyla, standing in the corridor, not running, just watching, frozen, then walking away. The footage ended. Nyla closed her eyes, breathing shallow. She remembered. She'd always remembered, but she hadn't let herself look at it. A soft voice spoke behind her. You did what they wouldn't. She turned. Subject 83 stood just inside the doorway. He looked worse now, skin paler, hands trembling, not from pain, but from the strain of control. The thing inside him, if it was still inside, was fighting harder now. I saw the footage, Nyla said. He nodded once. I figured you had. I didn't save them. You saved everyone else. Nyla looked away. That doesn't mean anything. He stepped closer. No one ever built a prison that didn't cost someone something. She studied him for a long moment. You're unraveling, she said. He didn't argue. How long do we have? He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. She saw it in his eyes. Whatever the signal was, whatever it had become, it wasn't static anymore. It was moving again, migrating, preparing for transmission. Later, in the crew quarters, she sat in silence. Holding the only thing she still had from Vale's station, a cracked ID badge with a smeared photo, heron burned at the corner, useless, a relic. She thought about what the mimic had said in the listening room. We are not prisons, we are promises. She finally understood. The thing inside 83 had never been meant to die. It had been meant to be delivered. And the people who'd made him, they knew, they'd planned it. That made him something worse than a containment. It made him a gift. A whisper wrapped in flesh, waiting to be unwrapped in the right system. And she might have been the one holding the bow. When she finally slept that night, she dreamed of Vale's station. But it was different this time. No fire, no screaming, just her, walking the corridors, alone, smiling, and someone behind her wearing her face. Chapter 8, Residual Echo. The AI core wasn't supposed to come back online. After the purge, after the breach in engineering, it should have stayed dead. Fried neurons, memory sectors collapsed, autonomy protocols turned to static. But as Nyla entered the lower comms tower, she heard it. A voice, weak, broken, but unmistakably artificial. Trent. The voice came from the wall console. Blue lights flickered on, one diode at a time, like the system was remembering how to breathe. She stepped forward. Central AI, she said. The voice responded, glitching around the edges. Containment integrity, breach code delta, signal noise, irrecoverable. Are you isolated? No. That single word landed like a blade. Subject 83 stood at the doorway, sweat beading on his forehead, fingers twitching like they wanted to dig into something that wasn't there. Don't engage it, he said. Nyla ignored him. Who did this? She asked the console. Who accessed you? The AI's voice shivered. Identity, unknown. Signal origin matches architecture outside known reference frameworks. Embedded pattern recognition anomalous. Nyla leaned closer. Pattern recognition. Embedded where? There was a long pause. Then the voice said something new, something it hadn't been programmed to say. You brought it. Nyla went still. 83 moved forward now, slowly. It's in everything, he said. Not just systems, not just people, ideas. It embeds itself in understanding, a new grammar, a new thought structure. The console sparked. The AI's voice warped mid-sentence into something melodic. It wasn't speaking anymore, it was humming. A low, childlike tune, wordless, and yet somehow familiar. Nyla stepped back. 83 staggered against the wall, one hand against his temple. I can feel it again, he gasped. It's trying to get out through the echoes, through me. Nyla pulled the override cable from her wrist and jammed it into the console port. A short jolt. Sparks flew. The humming stopped. The AI was silent again, but the hum lingered in her head, like it had never come from the speakers at all. They found a relay junction 3 decks up, part of the old maintenance network, long since decommissioned. It shouldn't have been powered, but the screens were active, scrolling lines of code in a language Nyla didn't recognize. Not binary, not Martian design. The characters didn't even follow geometry. They bent the longer you looked at them. She turned to 83. "What is this?" He stared at the screen, eyes wet, jaw tight. "This is the last part of me," he said. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled his shirt aside, exposing the left side of his chest. Underneath, embedded in the skin, was a bio-implant. Not surgical. Grown. Its edges were ridged like coral, pulsing faintly with blue light. But the light was turning red. Nyla stepped back. "How long?" He looked at her, full of something she hadn't seen before. Fear. "Since Valles," he said. "Since before you knew who I was." "You were there," she whispered. He nodded. "I was in containment 2 decks below, watching everything happen, listening. I was the reason they called it a breach. I was already slipping then, but they didn't know. They thought they'd caught it early." He touched the implant. His hand shook. "They were wrong." Nyla stepped toward the screen. Lines of code continued to scroll, but now they were changing, repeating, one phrase over and over. "The seed is spread." She pulled her sidearm and emptied a full stun charge into the terminal. The screen went dark, but the glow in 83's chest didn't fade. He sat down against the wall, breathing hard. "I can't hold it anymore." "You can," she said. "You have to." He looked up at her with something like apology in his eyes. "I'm not the Warden anymore." He closed his eyes. "And I don't know who is." In the silence that followed, Nyla sat beside him, not speaking, not planning, just being. The barrow gate creaked overhead, lights pulsed, the hum of power shifted in pitch. The ship was changing, not like something being corrupted, like something waking up. And Nyla realized the real signal hadn't been meant to infect the crew. It had been meant to build something out of them. Something with her face, her memories. Something that could leave. Chapter 9. The Flood Switch. The flood switch wasn't listed on any ship schematic. It had no official name, no access code, and no corporate serial tag burned into its housing. But Nyla had found it, deep in the barrowgate's keel spine, behind a false panel near the waste heat diverters, buried under a maze of corrosion and thermal shielding. A manual failsafe. The kind they stopped building after the Mars Treaty. The kind that didn't need permissions, didn't wait for consensus. A purge switch. One turn, and the ship's entire biosystem, oxygen regulation, AI governance, environmental integrity would collapse in on itself. It wasn't a clean death. It was the kind of button you installed when the only thing worse than destruction was survival. Subject 83 stood nearby, swaying faintly. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his shoulders were rigid. The implant in his chest pulsed red now, steady and urgent, like a countdown without numbers. "I used to think I could contain it forever," he said quietly. "Like I was some kind of firewall, something noble." "You were," Nyla said. Number Die was the hallway. It was always going to walk through me. She crouched next to the panel, pulled the cover off, and revealed the kill switch. A rusted dial, no indicator lights, just a single rotating arm etched with old maintenance marks. She hesitated. "You think this will stop it?" "No," 83 said. "I think it will delay it." She looked up at him. His face had changed in the last few hours. Not just the sweat, the shallow breathing, something behind the eyes, a pull, like something else was starting to stare out from behind the glass. "Then why not go now?" she asked. "Why not pull it and be done?" "Because it hasn't transferred yet." Nyla's stomach turned cold. "You think it still needs a host?" "Number, I think it's choosing one." The ship shook again, more than a tremor. This time, a shift. Like the barrow gate was adjusting course, but there was no AI, no navigation system left. Neela pulled up her wrist console, accessing emergency sensor logs. The propulsion relays were firing. Something was steering them toward deep-range transmission space. Not Earth, not Mars. Outward. She looked at 83. Transmission? Replication. He coughed once. Blood flecked his teeth. It's not just about infection, it's about distribution. It's growing itself a shell. A vessel Nyla stood. Her hands were steady now. How long before it finishes? 83 looked at her. Minutes. Maybe less. Then we finish first. They moved together down the spine corridor, back toward engineering. The ship groaned around them. Lights dimmed. Shadows stretched in unnatural ways. Once, Nyla turned her head and saw herself walking 2 paces behind. Eyes wrong. Smile flat. It vanished when she blinked. 83 didn't comment. He just kept walking. By the time they reached the core junction, the override controls were gone, melted into slag. The signal had rerouted everything into the ship's own nervous system. The barrow gate was no longer a machine. It was a living thing with an agenda. Nyla turned to 83. "You're the key," she said. "I was." She nodded. "You still are." He looked at her, understanding in his eyes, and fear, not of death, of what might come after. "Do it," he said. Nyla stepped forward and pressed her hand to his chest. The implant glowed, brighter, brighter. Then the light turned white, and the barrow gate screamed. Not a sound, not vibration, something deeper, a frequency that turned blood to ice and made the soul flinch. 83 dropped to his knees, gasping, fingers clawing at the floor. Nyla grabbed the flood switch, yanked it once, twice. The dial jammed. "Now," she said. "Pull it, Trent." "I am." The wall beside her lit up, not from lights, from eyes, faces, dozens. Some hers, some his. Some twisted into things they were never meant to be, all watching, all smiling. "Pull it!" 83 roared. She braced her foot against the housing, gripped the dial with both hands and ripped it clockwise. The system screamed, the power grid collapsed, emergency lights blinked out, and for a moment, just a breath, everything went still. When Nyla woke, there was only red, dim emergency glow reflecting off twisted bulkheads and silent consoles. The ship was dead, truly dead. No hum, no voice, no signal. She looked around. She was alone. Subject 83 was gone. Not dead, just gone. Only a dark smear on the floor where his body had been, and in its center, a single sentence etched in burn marks. Not a prison, a seed. She stood, chest tight, lungs burning. There was no time left. This ship wouldn't stay silent forever. Whatever had been here had scattered pieces of itself across the circuits, across her memories, across her. And somewhere close, it was, already sprouting. She turned toward the escape pods, because there was one thing left to do. Make sure the universe never saw what had grown in the dark, and pray she hadn't already carried it out with her. Chapter 10. Breach Zone. The barrow gate bucked as it detached from its own propulsion vector, emergency clamps hissing in protest. Nyla had overridden the command queue manually, severing the route that had been slowly pulling the ship toward the edge of known space. Now it drifted, rudderless, bleeding. She had 20 minutes of oxygen left in her suit and maybe 40 in the pod she'd rigged for launch. It wasn't clean. It wasn't safe. But it was outside. And that was enough. She moved through the docking spine in silence. Every vent she passed whispered. Not words, breaths. Like the ship had lungs now. Like the atmosphere inside it was no longer recycled air, but exhalation. The airlock controls were half melted. She used a crowbar. The pod shuddered open, steam venting from ruptured seals. Not optimal, but functional. She climbed in, sealed the hatch behind her, and didn't look back. There was no one left to follow her. No one left to save. As the pod detached, the barrow gate loomed large in the viewport. From this angle, she could see the structural damage: scorched hull plating, cracked stabilizers, at least 3 decks vented to vacuum. And yet, the ship glowed faintly, a red pulse beneath the skin. Not mechanical, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Nyla adjusted trajectory, sending the pod into a lazy arc toward open space. No beacons, no transmitters, just black between stars. The comm panel came to life, static, then a voice. "Trent." She froze. Not 83, not the AI. Her. The voice on the other end sounded like her. Exact intonation, timing, breath, but she hadn't transmitted. "You survived," the voice said. "You always do." Nyla leaned in. "I didn't send this." "Who are you?" "You," it replied. "Or the better version, the one who let it grow." "Not possible. You're not on the barrow gate anymore, Nyla, but it is on you." The viewport fogged just slightly. A smear of condensation. On the outside. Impossible. She wiped it, and saw, for just a moment, a face in the reflection. Her own. Grinning. Behind her. She spun around. No one there. Of course not. The comm crackled again. "Seeds out. No stopping it now." She shut off the panel. Silence returned. She sat there shaking, hands wrapped tight around the console grip as the pod drifted into deep black. 3 hours later, a rescue beacon lit up on her proximity scanner. Unregistered, civilian class, no call sign. She hesitated, considered disabling her transponder entirely, but she didn't. Instead, she opened the channel. "Agent Nyla Trent, emergency evacuation barrow gate incident, requesting isolation and quarantine." The reply came 30 seconds later. Female voice, calm, no accent. "Understood, Agent Trent. Help is on the way. Please remain where you are." She shut her eyes, didn't speak, because something about that voice felt too familiar, like it knew her name before she gave it, like it was already walking toward her in the dark. Chapter 11. Debrief in the Hollow. The room was cold, not physically, not really, but Nyla couldn't get warm. She sat in a chair that was too straight, under lights that buzzed with chemical perfection. Across from her sat 3 figures in dark grey uniforms. No insignia, no visible weapons, no names. This wasn't an interrogation, it was an observation. The walls weren't reflective, but she could feel herself watching from the other side. Not metaphorically, not metaphor, just watching. "State your designation," the man in the center said. She looked down at her hands, pale, still scratched from the wiring panel on the escape pod. Still her hands. "Nyla Trent, Internal Oversight Bureau. Do you believe you are compromised?" "I don't know." "When did exposure begin?" She thought of the first night, the lights flickering, the silence after the scream. Subject 83 strapped to the rig, looking at her like he already knew what came next. "I think I was already exposed before I boarded." The woman on the left leaned forward. "How?" "I was at Valles 2 years ago. We have no surviving records from that incident." "I know." The third figure said nothing, just tapped something into a pad. Nyla studied them. "Is this Cassiel Station?" "Yes." "Quarantine perimeter?" "Yes." "Then why don't I feel quarantined?" The woman paused her typing. "What do you mean?" Nyla's throat felt dry, like the air wasn't meant for breathing. She leaned forward. "I think you're not here to stop it. I think you're here to monitor it." The room was very quiet for several seconds. Then the man in the center smiled. Not warmly, not coldly, just curious. "Thank you, Agent Trent. You'll be escorted to Observation Bay 3 for further debrief." The lights dimmed. Nyla was already standing when the guards arrived. Observation Bay 3 had no mirrors, just white walls, padded corners, a chair bolted to the center of the room, no restraints, just a screen on the wall, black and blank. She stood in front of it, waited. 10 minutes passed. Then the screen turned on. Her face looked back. Not a live feed. No camera. Just her. Neutral expression. Hair tied differently. Eyes darker somehow. The figure blinked, then smiled. Nyla didn't. The voice from the wall speaker was hers too, but it spoke first. "Still think you made it out?" She stared. Didn't answer. The image blinked again. "You're not the container," it said. "You're the courier." Then the screen went dark again. She stayed in the room that night, alone. The lights never turned off. No one came to take her blood, scan her eyes, ask more questions. She waited for sleep. It didn't come, because somewhere in the back of her mind, something had started humming. Not loud, not yet, just enough to set a rhythm, just enough to be remembered. And when she closed her eyes, she could feel the hum vibrating in the floor, in the light, in her own thoughts, like it was waiting for her to say something, like it was listening, like it already knew her name. Chapter 12. Glass silence. The glass was one way. Nyla was sure of that. She sat alone in the white room, her bare feet pressed against the cold floor, her hands still and open on her knees. There were no restraints, no straps, no sedatives in her bloodstream. Not anymore. They were watching. Of course they were. Somewhere on the other side of the mirror, someone was monitoring her vitals, recording every micro-expression, listening to every breath. Not because they wanted to help her, because they wanted to see when she slipped, when the signal inside her finished blooming. She hadn't spoken since the last interview, not to them, not to herself, because she didn't trust her own voice anymore. She had caught herself humming the tune, the one the AI sang before it collapsed, a gentle, looping lullaby with no words, no beginning, and no way to stop. She didn't even realize she was doing it until the walls responded. Soft pulses in the glass, minute warps in the reflection, like the room was leaning forward just slightly, as if listening for a secret. She stood, walked toward the mirror. Her bare feet made no sound. She stared at her reflection. It stared back. The surface of the glass looked solid, perfect, sterile, but she knew better. She could feel a tremor in the center, a tiny ripple like something behind it was breathing. Then, just for a moment, the reflection blinked. But she hadn't. She leaned closer. The glass didn't fog, didn't distort, just stared. Then her reflection smiled. She did not. 3 decks above, in the Lysium Station control room, 2 operators sat watching her. "She hasn't moved in hours," one said. The other tapped through biometric logs. "Brain activity's flat in all expected areas. Cortisol levels are low. She's not resisting, not reacting." The first operator tilted his head. Like she's waiting for something. Or listening. They watched the screen in silence. Down in the room, Nyla pressed her forehead against the glass. On the other side, her reflection didn't match. It whispered something. The mics didn't catch it, but they didn't need to. Somewhere deep in the station's comm core, a new file appeared. No user tag, no creation metadata, just a line of code, pulsing faintly. "We promise." The lights in the observation wing dimmed, and in a white room built to contain unknown threats, a woman stood very still, smiling, as the mirror smiled back. Epilogue. Vessel class unknown. Recovered transmission origin. Deep drift, buoy 7KAF. Timestamp 0902 hours. Sole standard relay signature. Non-Terran. Encrypted layer. 9 begin audio. Distorted static. A low hum, almost melodic. Then a voice. Female, calm, unhurried. "This is Lieutenant Mara Quell of the Scylla, Long-Range Salvage and Recovery. We are transmitting this report for any and all IOB-aligned enforcement vessels operating in Zone Delta. We've encountered a derelict near the edge of Lagrange 6. No active transponder, no beacon, but clearly military adjacent. The hull is badly scorched. Engine block looks fused shut, like it self-fired its own reactors. We think it was once a prison ship. Nameplate partially intact, something gate. There's no sign of life aboard, no bodies either, just empty suits. burned ID tags. Some wiring that doesn't match spec. One of our crew picked up a softband signal, encrypted but not human. It's not just noise, it's layered, structured, like a message designed to teach, not transmit. We haven't deciphered the whole thing, but we extracted a phrase from one of the internal data bursts. I'm uploading the raw code with this report, but the translation's been stable across 6 scans. Silence. Then, the sound of digital playback. A deep, non-verbal pulse like a heartbeat through water. Then the voice returns. The phrase is, "We are already on board. Recommend full quarantine of this region and relay a hard-burn warning to all outbound civilian liners. This ship isn't dead. It's dreaming. End audio incident. Tag, Unsol IC-47, Veil status, suppressed personnel. Notified, redacted, follow-up required, negative system flag, do not pursue, note, delete upon read."